All right. Well, I am back with the new episode of Chatting with Asta. I'm actually on the West Coast now. And what a great way to start a new season of this series. I've got Josh Ruben, actor, director, producer, writer, all around funny guy, awesome person, making a name for himself in the horror genre. And yeah, so we're just going to get started today, and I hope you enjoy. All right. Hey, Josh. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you. I hope they enjoy too.
Yeah, I do. I really genuinely really do because if they don't, then
It's gonna be a mess,
yeah,
it'll just be a real disaster.
yeah, and I feel like it'd be like a Christmas movie plot. Like, people will just not. They'll just, the podcast will die, and even though people have been
Yeah.
DMing me, and it's like, what do I do? What do I do? But
But then we'll both meet a handsome, large Caucasian who will teach us how to bake, and
yes,
then there'll be very gendered dynamics,
yes,
probably a Christmas tree, and
yes.
we'll all learn how to be Christian. Christian, you know what I mean? Just like
Oh
really good
yeah.
Christians.
Oh yeah, and but there has to be some sort of miscommunication that happens that can't just easily be double checked so that like your
Right. Right.
ego is shattered if you don't like participate in
Yeah.
Christmas tradition, and then it's
Oh,
like
completely.
all over.
Some elderly in-law will get viciously involved. Just a typical your American channel plot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's funny. I feel like this is one of these interviews that I'm doing that feels like a culmination of a lot of things, but I don't know if you knew this, but I was like part of a little mini Josh Ruben fan club like 10 years.
What?
Yeah.
Oh no! Oh
Um,
goodness! So that would have been like really problematic comedy videos and
yeah.
some
Like
some
college humor.
character. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh
like
boy.
I remember I was working at NBC and I was working in like the tourist photo sessions. And so basically I made friends with a lot of pages who now work for, everything
Yeah.
from in style to sci-fi and all the stuff in between.
Just starring in White Lotus. I mean, Aubrey Plaza, one of the most
Yeah,
famous pages of
yeah.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I remember that every time one of the SNL pages would come, I would be like, you should put Josh Ruben on there. Like we would all like be showing these videos of you and like the grammar Nazi video and like your
Oh
Jesse
yeah.
and so it's kind of surreal because in a way you're sort of the beginning of my film journey was being convinced to do a sketch comedy video that they were going to send to College Humor and Funny or Die.
Whoa. Cool.
And I did that, and I was like, "Whoa, this is actually fun film," because I was a theater actor, and then
Mhm.
yeah, so I was like, "I'm on the same side as Josh Ruben," and I don't know,
Wow. Hey,
yeah,
I mean, God, I've had so many experiences of that where it's like you get quote unquote internet famous or mildly known. Like now I'm recognized for mostly for college humor stuff. Most people don't even know I'm like behind certain horror movies.
yeah,
But
yeah,
then you meet other people that you've been fanning over, and it's like, oh my God, I grew up watching you, and you become like buddies with people. Like somehow, like Devon Sawa has like followed me on like the socials, and I'm just like talking to Devon Sawa. Like it just that stuff doesn't seem real. It's like I watched you in Casper, or like Elijah Wood. We had a meeting with Elijah Wood, and I was like, and it's just so normal, and it just feels so yeah, so interesting. It's a small world, and everybody's a human being. Everybody goes to the bathroom, so
oh yeah,
kind
we
of
all we all we
yeah,
all do it. We don't want to admit it,
yeah,
and like when you get married, you don't want to admit that you have to share the same bathroom and all that stuff, but
yeah,
we do,
yeah. Oh no,
we
I did
do,
right away.
yeah,
It's got to get it
but
over with.
yeah, and you got married recently, right?
I did, yeah, yeah. This amazing venue upstate called Foxfire Mountain House, near where actually where I shot my last film, and near where I grew up in Woodstock. Yeah, it's lovely.
How did you like get from there to LA? Like what was that journey about? Was it just because of the industry was fault making you come here, or like what made you go from east to west? Because that is a
Yeah, I was. That's a great question because I was holding on so tightly to New York, and it was like a threefold thing. The first of which was I met a girl in California at the time, and I was in a long distance relationship with this great girl. We were not together, but she it was like the combination of a long distance relationship with someone from California, and we were kind of trying a little back and forth at the time.
Mhm.
But then it was like, and I was starting to feel like I was one of the last sort of New York standbys of what was once the, say, College Humor crew, or like my
Yeah.
film crew. There was a very small community, as I'm sure you know.
Mm.
And then I got a pilot playing one of four characters, of four leads, opposite these three incredible actresses, including Kristen Milioti, who I worship,
Mhm.
Nina Pedrad, who co-wrote this show with Kristen, and Megan Ferguson. And it was produced by the Always Sunny guys for FX. So that gig was like okay, this is the sign. I'm going to go out there. I'm finally going to bite the bullet. It's a personal life thing. It's a business thing. And so that was the end of 2016 where I came out. Pilot didn't get picked up,
Mhm.
and I just stayed out here, continued, directing commercials and all that shit. And then by the time I made my first film, I was hitting a crossroads just in my professional career where I didn't want to direct commercials anymore. And I was like, I'm gonna make a movie no matter what, even if I'm
Yeah.
holding the boom, even if, like whatever, it didn't matter. In that kind of Larry, in kind of a Duplassy kind of way. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
let's just dive in and make a thing. So yeah, I just I willed it to life somehow, independently financed it with the aid of many an investor, and then that's kind of what led to my next feature and how I ended up becoming like one of the new kids on the block.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just so surprised to see like that you had worked, not only because I knew you originally from sketches and everything, but I also saw that
Hmm.
you had worked on a film with a friend of mine, Nicole Rodenberg. A
Oh yeah, what
And
children do.
yes, and then when you worked on Scare Me with Aya Cash, I was like, so this guy's just working with the BFA U of M people because that's I went to the U of M and I went when I was a freshman. Nicole was a junior, um,
Wow.
and yeah, and like I remember one of the funny things that because it's just such a small world. I've never met Aya, but when I was in my acting school, my teachers would pull me aside, and one of them was like, you're if you're not careful, you're gonna be like Aya." Like it was like a warning, and then
Oh God.
she's just become one of the most like interesting actresses out there.
Yeah, that's like saying if you're not careful, you'll become a genius, a
Yeah, I know.
wealthy, well-respected genius in the film and television world and theater
Exactly.
world for that matter.
Yeah, and
Ay,
like
ay, ay.
to do such a fun movie. I mean, what was it like working with her? I mean, that film was just so fun, and it really is about the performances. It is about the
It
performance.
really is, yeah. You needed to do that when you were thank you for saying that. I mean, you need to do that when you're making a film that's essentially a black box play, and
Yeah,
it was essentially designed to be affordable to make. And Aya was the most famous, most talented, most accessible person I knew.
yeah.
And we weren't even necessarily buddies. I'd kind of known her through the years through her husband, Josh.
Mhm.
Um, and I just sort of asked her, I said, would you be willing, I saw you wrapped your show. Would you be willing to, I think there was actually an article where she said, I want to do challenging roles and I want to challenge myself. And I reached out to her and said, do you want to play multiple characters in an anthology film that doesn't like leave the campfire? And she was like, hell yeah, mainly because she could drive to work every day. She was living upstate.
Mhm.
So despite the blizzards and such, she was able to come to work and like do her thing. She was just a joy.
Yeah,
She was so incredible to work with, so down, so collaborative, so friendly, wonderful to the crew, wonderful to me,
yeah.
like the most normal, the most lovely. And we were just texting the other day. She's like, "Remember when we made a movie? I hope we get to do it again someday." And so yeah, I had an incredible time, and I have her to essentially to thank for helping me kick off my film career, and the fact that she got The Boys right when my tiny mid-pandemic movie came out, and that The Boys was such a giant hit. It just the confluence was excellent.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember seeing that. I was like, wow, like, okay, so this is coming out and this is coming out, and it's such a she I mean, those are both like roles that require like such an exuberance. So it was kind of like exciting to see that.
Yeah,
It also was cool for me because like I said, I've been a fan of yours for a while, and it was just so cool to see you kind of enter this like indie horror world, which, as I'm sure you've seen, is like so welcoming, so loving.
yeah.
I hate to use the word community because depending on who you're talking to, they'll say like, oh, that's depending on what hot topic is going on. But I think
Yeah,
it is a great community. Like, you can crowdsource information and connections, and you know.
truly. You truly can. Yeah.
But you just worked on something that I saw my first month that I moved to LA. I went to Beyond Fest and I finally got to see A Wounded Fawn. That was why.
Yeah. Pretty wackadoo. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, I remember there was one point in the movie, I don't want to give any spoilers to anybody who hasn't seen it per se, but I remember there when the owl imagery became so prominent, I just started thinking about that sketch that you did years and years and years. And I
Wow,
just,
Woman Afraid of Owls. Well done. Yeah,
yes,
exactly. If only there's someone should intercut that character after we see,
yeah,
yeah, Diana's owl.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I have this chirping fire fire.
Yeah, you got to change your battery. You know,
Oh,
move
I
to a new
changed.
place.
The
I got it.
batteries have been changed. They
Oh wow, it just
just
likes to let you know it needs help.
yeah.
It's
It's
sick.
just so that's the occasional chirp that the audience might hear is a I don't know.
It's part of the ride.
It's asking for attention. It's part of the vibe, and the occasional sound of a light rail. That's also part of the vibe. But
That's
you
okay.
know,
I have no concept if I sound further away from the laptop. I'm like pacing because
yeah.
I can't sit anymore. So hopefully I don't sound too far away. Can you still
Oh no.
hear me?
Yeah, I
Sounds
can totally still hear you.
oh good. Oh great, cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
technology works. Great. So I can pace around like I'm
Yeah.
on an Aaron Sorkin show.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Um
No, that's actually the new vibe of this show. It's gonna be just like the neurotic ramblings of people learning to socialize post pandemic. Like that's
yeah. I mean I think it would be really cathartic to just hear two people talking for the entirety of the interview. Could be
yeah.
terrible for sound, but it could be, I don't know, a nice uncut gems kind of vibe to an audio show. It's like you're recording a walk. That
Oh
might be kind of a cool idea, actually.
oh yeah. I mean, I definitely have listened to my share of vloggers, and my husband will walk in on me and he's like, "What are they even talking about?" I'm like, "I don't know. I think she's just talking about like what coffee she's making." And it's just like when people aren't here, I just need other voices. It's a thing.
Yeah, I hear you. You're like Elvis, you know, you can't be alone. You know what I mean?
I
Just the
can't.
fame. Yeah.
That's
Whitney
man.
Houston had the same. It's just, you got to be real careful because, you know, you don't have people around. You got to be able to self soothe.
Oh
So, yeah,
man. Oh, why did I
got
pay
to
my
hear those
therapist?
voices.
I shouldn't have paid my
Yeah.
therapist. I should just have
No.
talked to you
You
and
can pay me.
just
That'll be
I'll just pay I'll
175, I guess.
oh, okay. Yeah, I'll Venmo you. I'll Venmo you. Um,
I'll
but
decline. I'll decline.
yeah, I was like going through some of your credits because obviously, like, we've talked about Scare Me, we've talked about A Wounded Fawn. I recently saw your very cleverly named Roger character in Blood Relatives, which is basically
Ah, yes.
like a Renfield, right? Like kind of like that's the vibe. That's the vibe. Uh,
Yes, yeah, that's about Roger Fieldner. Who would have thought
yeah,
when Noah Sagan popped that Easter egg in the daddy daughter vampire trip that
yes.
that's what it would be. But
That was a delightful movie. I Blood Relatives, guys. It's on Shutter right now. Definitely check it out. I love the fact that like a lot of the films that especially that you've worked on that are in the genre are kind of like using the genre to get people to like explore themes that
yeah,
are not just the scare or the shock or the awe, whatever of what people typically associate with horror, but that horror can sometimes be a gateway to kind of sideswipe deeper themes like intimacy between like a two people or confronting like
Hmm.
your own inner demons. So yeah, I don't know if there's like, especially with, we were just talking briefly about owls, but A Wounded Fawn is very much about tackling the inner beast that is like toxic masculinity to the nth degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's so unfortunately relevant. It has a lot to. I mean, it's saying so many things. I think one of the most unfortunately prescient things is that women often have to put themselves in theoretically dangerous or squirmy situations
Mm,
to sort of find the one. Dating is a dangerous endeavor, or at least uncomfortable. You know, it's not often that murder will occur, but we live in a world where murder does occur. When or even when it isn't under the auspices of a date. And then yes, I mean then there's a lot to say about um, narcissistic men, but also just about private justice and how most narcissistic personalities, regardless if they're a murderer, they'd rather like flay themselves, flay themselves to death rather than admit their wrongdoing, and
yeah.
how unfortunately true that is. But it was fun to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you say that because I think that that is like a very, especially with the way that you're saying, like the not taking or the path to redemption, that a lot of people in modern culture, like the cancel culture, it's just avoiding accountability culture. Like
Hmm.
instead, they would rather be like, well, I guess I'm canceled. Well, I guess that's the end of my career. And then they'll just
Yeah,
really, in reality, they're just going to be hiding in the shadows for like a few months, a few years, and then they'll just,
that's right.
I'm cured, instead of
Yeah.
just admitting, like, because if people just want you to admit that you've done wrong.
Yeah, yeah. One of the only people who quote unquote did it right was Dan Harmon, which is so interesting. It's like it took kind of, I don't want to say one of the most unassuming personalities, but it's like it's just so interesting. It's so hard for men to apologize. And we're also unfortunately in a climate where it's like sometimes people are being accused when there isn't actually something to be accused of. There's also that sort of danger. But
Yeah.
whether or not someone has actually done something, to at least open up your line of communication to the masses, to do a live Instagram video,
Yeah.
to do a talk back, it's so valuable. Like we were talking about College Humor earlier, and I was like, oh, you've seen some problematic sketch vids or whatever. It's like, well,
Yeah.
comedy doesn't age well. Certain jokes definitely don't age well. Like
Yeah.
racist jokes used to be big in my town
Mhm.
growing up because again, like um, society advances. There are certain conversations that are whatever taboo or kept under the carpet. We live in a very, I'd say, problematic society, problematic world,
Yeah.
and men are brought up to be a certain way, to not be vulnerable, to not open up lines of communication. It's I'm still learning how to do that sort of thing, and so it's like any opportunity any of us have, especially as men, to open up a line of communication, to be vulnerable and take accountability, or at least have the conversation. Like I remember, I was really proud of this moment. There was someone who came forward. You know, I used to play this character in this show called Precious Plum, and I wear heavy prosthetics. She was she's an overweight woman who was very confident in her sexuality, and a lot of people of all shapes and sizes and backgrounds enjoy the character, but there's some people that today would call it fat shaming. And I remember that there was one or two messages that I got where it was like, I basically just expressing that they didn't quite enjoy that character or weren't going to support anything, of that nature because it was, punching down. And I just simply like said, "Hey, let's start a conversation," as opposed to just being
Yeah.
like, "Fuck off," you know what I mean? Like I'm blocking it, and it opened up. It was so beautiful. Like this person was so thankful, and it ended with thanks, and it ended with like warm follow-ups and check-ins and all kinds of stuff. And it's like it's so easy. And I've done it with trolls too. Like when people will come after me to just be a dick, and I call people out, or rather than calling people out, it's like, hey, you okay? Or hey, when people like kind of punch down, they might be in pain. I've been there too. You can tell me whatever or whatever it is. Like it's so important to be able to at least be in a practice of like actually checking in and not trying to fight back with with words, because words can kill, but they can also heal. But anyway, did you think that this was going to go so wonderfully intense? I'm happy to, but I just you're gonna win the journalism award, frankly, for talking to internet celebrity Josh Ruben and his comedy background.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think that comedy, I always think about like all the comedy greats, and I think about the fact that like even Eddie Murphy is like, "Hey, I said some shitty things that I take it
Yeah,
back." But the thing is that I think that comedy is in a weird place right now, and I guess genre is also
yeah.
a way in, but like the idea that I as a woman and as
Mhm,
a person who has PTSD before, people were even talking about it. I was confronting it and I've done work on it and
mhm,
stuff. Um, I don't like living in a humorless world where people take everything so to task. Um,
mhm,
I think that that's scary to me. That's kind of a fear of
mhm.
mine, is that we're just going to be analyzing our speech so much that we just don't say anything, and then we repress it, and then because I saw that sort of in your character in A Wounded Fawn, and how he almost had this veneer that men practice when they want to appear good, and when they do it enough,
Yeah,
they sort of like think they're doing the bare minimum. But it's like that you were talking about, like practice behaviors. Like I was just talking the other day to a friend of mine about how, like, one of the biggest mistakes that we do is the way that we differ behavioral raising between girls and boys, and how
That's
we'll
exactly right.
we'll go, oh, he's just, boys will be boys. He's just let him play a little longer. But then they'll be like, come over here, be a good girl. And
He likes you. That's why he pushed you.
yeah, and it's just funny because I think part of it is that women, you can say biologically, evolutionarily, whatever about maturity, aging. They always say that women are more mature, like sooner or whatever. But I think it's because we
They
simply
do.
are taught to repress certain reckless behavior. Whereas
Yeah.
men, like I'll see dads at like some of my day jobs, I'll see dads telling their sons like, go say thank you or whatever, but they don't teach them why that's important. Like they don't go,
Mhm.
wasn't it nice that that person did that for you? Wouldn't you like to?
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. That's well put. We absolutely do treat the genders differently, and it's like if we can, men still are. Oh gosh, what's the name of the guy? He's got a brilliant podcast. He summed up this whole discussion, especially about like the difference between the genders and about just biologically how us boys are a bit behind, and that's not considered in school and
Yeah.
in upbringing and the like, and that's why young men, especially young Caucasian men in this culture, are so in danger of being a danger, is because you're brought up into all this privilege, and that you're behind, and there's frustration, and then there's screen time, and then there's no social bravery.
Yeah.
It's a really really dangerous kind of time bomb.
If a woman laughs at a man,
Yeah,
that could be violent. Like, because men being humiliated leads to violence.
right,
So like
right.
I remember
Men
hearing
are
that.
afraid that women will laugh at them.
Yes.
Yeah. And
And
women
and
are
I
afraid
remember,
that men will kill them.
yes, 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 yes. And I remember hearing that quote right after I saw Mandy. And that's literally the movie. Is
Mm,
she laughs at him and then shit hits the fan.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. That's exactly right.
and like with
Yeah. So
your,
unfortunately too.
yeah, and with your character, it's like and maybe it's because of you as a performer. You have a very self-awareness about like how you have a very warm face, you know, like a very, you
Mhm.
seem softer. I think you called
Mhm.
yourself a Muppet at Beyond Fest, but you have like this good guy face, you know? That is my bias as a woman, is
Mhm.
those are the ones I'm scared of, you
It's
know?
often the sweet-looking ones that, yeah, are in fact hiding something. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, the
yeah,
unassuming ones. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's true.
The ones who like, have an overly manicured appearance. Those are the ones that I'm
That's
like,
right.
"Ooh, I don't wanna get, like, my lipstick on his shirt," you know? Like, I don't wanna.
Yeah, because God knows that's exactly right. God knows how he'll react. No, it's unfortunately true. It's very. I mean, I hate to say that, like, Patrick Bateman as a character is quite accurate, but I think unfortunately it is. And this
Yeah.
movie, like Wounded Fawn, is Patrick Bateman at the Evil Dead cabin, but the Deadites are essentially the Greek goddesses of vengeance,
Yes.
and all they want him to do, they like Sarah Lynn, my brilliant co-star,
Oh, brilliant.
articulating this beautifully. She's like they don't lay a hand on him. They just want him to be accountable or hold himself
Yeah.
accountable. We were just the country was ruled by someone who would rather flay himself alive than admit himself as vulnerable or wrong, and will likely go to the grave that way.
Mhm.
And that type of personality is extremely dangerous. You hear very dangerous things and tales about that type of personality or really narcissistic um, men in general, and they all hide behind that veneer. Like even down to the weapon this guy has, it's exotic. It's a conversation piece. He's a
Mhm.
peacocker. He's self-aggrandizing. All part of the narrative. Yeah, it's sad but true.
But they will do anything to get to the top, but that's where, they if especially if they don't have an attitude of accountability, because accountability to me is phoenix culture. It's saying like, I'm willing
Mm-hmm.
to burn myself to the ashes,
Mm.
build a new version of myself. Everyone's so afraid of expressing themselves because of that. And yet they also will word vomit on Twitter, like.
The word vomit on Twitter and people, it's a dangerous time because people there'll always be one person. It's like the Murphy's law of tweeting
Yeah.
or social media. Something will inevitably go wrong or be turned around, and
Yep.
in this era of especially fragile personalities, not even to put
Yeah.
it entirely on the one gender, but certainly of men, it's like, well, that retaliation will often be so, figuratively violent, if anything,
Yeah.
and will revert back to it. So it's like it's everything we can do as parents. I'm not a parent. I've got three cats. Two are
That's
outside
apparent.
though. To raise yeah, there you go. That's kind of a parent.
Yeah.
You got to do everything you can if you're out there and you're raising boys
Hmm.
to raise boys with just laying in empathy at every possible turn and showing them, uh, how crucial it is to listen and be patient, and especially with non-man genders.
Yes. Yes. It's an incredible thing because basically you have to make them care about something that they might not have needed to care about something. You have to build that bridge.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I've noticed in general societally, and which is probably similarly why a lot of us get into genre work or just storytelling, is trying to communicate something that we want to model in the world. And
Mm.
you can't be didactic all the time. You can't always tell people how to act. You need to like show them a mode that basically is like, I think of movies as sort of like the Matrix in a way. Like you plug yourself into like empathy, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I am not, you know, I am not a problematic white male guy in a wounded fawn. But when I watched that, I thought about like your side of it, your character's side of it. Like if
Yeah.
if the structure of your life and the foundation of your life continues to feed your righteousness, then of course you're not gonna want to understand it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. That's true.
just to somewhat show empathy to the villain of the film, because I feel like, of course, as a woman, I'm like, men are trash, but like I can't live in a world where I'm like, hating all, men and everything that they represent.
No, no, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, but conversely, you do have to be careful with how these dudes are raised. I feel so out of touch. I mean, I have male nephews, but I feel out of touch as they're kind of like just sweet young boys right now. Just how they're going to be, and they've got incredible families. So it's just I'm eager to see what the next generation is. I feel like they'll be able to kind of handle everything after what the last couple of years were. There were probably more brushes with reality
Yeah,
than anything else. So I'd like to think that there was a lot of time for conversation, the terrible events of the world and death and Black Lives Matter and
yeah,
inevitable conversation that hopefully they'll have at these formative ages that change them, for the better.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I hope so too. I also know, just from social work that I do, that one of the issues that's come up is that there's an increased disassociation in this current generation,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's also stuff that, like, you know I grew up, in a generation where, like, my parents and I watched Return of the Jedi, and it was like brand new to me as much as it was to that. Like, there was a certain amount of content
yeah,
available, and then it's just gone ape shit since the mid 2000s. And now, like, you can't really yell at like a 15-year-old kid for not knowing who Mork and Mindy is. Like, they didn't have it on,
yeah.
like, so there's just so much um stuff that's inherited generationally and culturally
Hmm.
that they are getting like the Cliff's Notes version of, and so it's
Hmm.
unlived and not promoted. So it is
Hmm.
important to make stories like, kind of like the ones that you're making, like exploring stuff that maybe was influenced by something that you loved from like 40 years ago, but it's still, we need to keep repeating the Oedipus cycle. We keep repeating these stories, because otherwise people are not they're not going to retain it in their DNA, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's valuable to well, this is why just the genre itself is just so damn great. It's there's endless opportunity to make commentary without being derivative.
Yeah.
There's constant opportunity to substitute whatever the social issue is with some new imaginative terror, and that's what's so great about it. But ultimately, it's like you could draw every wicked, jagged goblin and dragon, but nothing is scarier than people. So it's like as long as we're a civilization, there'll be shit to write about. And it's why horror is so great. We're living vicariously through survivors, through
Yeah.
surviving protagonists, and we get to walk away, right, and go to dinner and talk about it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, real quickly, a very important question about your One Life to Live credit. What is that?
I know, girl. I mean, I
Not
was
just
the
one episode,
bartender.
3 episodes?
Several. Oh yeah, oh yeah. When I that was like my first big gig, quote
Yeah.
unquote, like my first lines on television. So I was so nervous. I'd love to go back and find them. I'm probably absolutely horrific. I was the bartender at Ultraviolet, and talk about toxic men. I actually remember overhearing the very very tall and handsome, all granted, uh, slick-haired producer talking about how he'll never hire a full-time actor who is under 5'10", and I'm five. I'm like I fudge and say I'm 5'8".
Yeah.
And I just thought like that was so, and he said it within my earshot. He wasn't telling me. He was like, "Oh no, I would never hire." He was talking to somebody else, but it was such a extremely New York kind of romantic New York actors experience, but it was
Yeah.
also like definitely at a time where it was so misogynistic, and you see and hear like certain actors talking a certain way, and they're all just like quote unquote stuck.
Yeah.
They were all feeling like, man, they wish they could be on whatever Law and Order, but they're doing soap and this, that, and the other thing. They've all
Yeah.
done hundreds of episodes. Um, But yeah, that was a beautiful time, and I lived in Manhattan, so I get to leave that studio on 60 whatever it was street and
Mhm.
walk back to my apartment in the
Uh,
20s and just like enjoy the fact that I was like famous,
yeah,
But no, I wasn't.
that that's wonderful. I just needed to see how that tracked with the, epic nature of your career. I was like, where does
Early,
that
early,
how
don't
does
tell.
that really play? But no, I mean, again, it's been so wonderful. And if is there anything that you want to share with our listeners? What is something that you watched recently that's just like, oh my god, everyone needs to watch it? Um, anything. This is your moment to kind of plug.
I mean, what did I see? I really, really loved. I don't know how disturbing it was, but I really, really enjoyed um, uh, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Like super, super enjoyed it. I loved all of those actresses. I loved the humor. Helena Rain's direction. I thought that was all just so killer. And that one really stuck with me. There's one I saw in 2022 at um, at Beyond Fest. That's a 2023 release, so it might be cheating, but it's called
Mhm.
Sick, and it's from Kevin Williamson and John Hyams is the director,
Evan
which is
Williamson.
alone. Oh my god, it's so good. I like my wife and I were like screaming at the screen, like practically leaping out of our seats. It was so good. I can't wait to see it.
Totally. Well, I'm going to sign off on this episode and thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Of course.